I'm Alice, I'm 26 years old, and let me tell you something. The moment my brother's fiancée whispered that I shouldn't have come to their engagement party because poor people ruin the photos, she had no idea she just insulted the owner of the very company where she and her entire family worked. She also didn't know that her contract would be terminated before their wedding even happened. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. And if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, hit that like and subscribe button. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me take you back to where this all started. When I was 16, my grandfather passed away, leaving me his small apartment in downtown Portland. While my friends worried about prom dates and college applications, I was dealing with lawyers and inheritance paperwork. My parents lived 3 hours away in a smaller town, and honestly, they didn't think much of the inheritance. "It's just an old one-bedroom," my mom said over the phone. "Maybe you can sell it for college money." But when I saw that apartment, something clicked. It had good bones. High ceilings, original hardwood floors, and huge windows that let in tons of natural light. Sure, it needed work. A lot of work. The wallpaper was peeling, the bathroom fixtures were from the 1970s, and the kitchen looked like it hadn't been updated since my grandfather moved in 30 years earlier. Most teenagers would have sold it immediately, but I'm not most teenagers. I got myself 3 part-time jobs that summer. Waiting tables at a diner, working retail at a clothing store, and cleaning offices on weekends. Every single dollar I earned went toward that apartment. I watched YouTube videos to learn how to strip wallpaper and sand floors. I haunted estate sales and thrift stores for vintage furniture and decor. My fingers were constantly stained with paint, and I had more cuts and bruises from DIY projects than a kid learning to skateboard. My friends thought I was crazy. "Alice, you're 17, my best friend Sarah said when I turned down yet another party invitation. "You're supposed to be having fun, not playing house." But this wasn't playing house. This was building something that was entirely mine. The transformation took 8 months. By the time I graduated high school, that little apartment looked like it belonged in a magazine. I'd created this gorgeous vintage aesthetic. Mid-century furniture, warm lighting, plants everywhere, and artwork from local artists. The bathroom had subway tiles and a clawfoot tub I'd found at a salvage yard. The kitchen had open shelving and vintage appliances that actually worked. And then came the decision that would change everything. I was planning to live in the dorms during college, which meant the apartment would just sit empty. That's when I discovered Airbnb. "You want to rent out Grandpa's apartment?" my mom asked, sounding skeptical. "To strangers. It's a good investment," I explained, though I was really just hoping it would help pay for college expenses. That first listing went live on a Tuesday. By Friday, I was booked solid for the next 3 months. Turns out, 20-something bloggers and Instagram influencers were absolutely obsessed with vintage aesthetics, and my apartment was exactly what they were looking for. The booking requests started pouring in faster than I could approve them. "Perfect backdrop for content creation," one review said. "Every corner is incredibly photogenic," said another. I hired Mrs. Henderson from down the hall to handle check-ins and basic cleaning between guests. She was a retired teacher who loved having something to do, and she took pride in making sure every guest felt welcome. The building's elderly superintendent, Mr. Garcia, helped with any maintenance issues in exchange for a small monthly fee. Within 6 months, I was making more money from that apartment than most people my age made working full-time jobs. But more importantly, I was learning about business, customer service, marketing, and hospitality. I read every book about real estate investing and hospitality management I could get my hands on. My family knew I was renting out the apartment, but they had no idea how successful it had become. When they asked how school was going, I'd mention the apartment was doing okay and quickly change the subject. Looking back, I think I was protecting my dream. They'd already made it clear they thought I was wasting time on that old apartment instead of focusing on my studies. College was great, don't get me wrong. I studied business administration with a focus on hospitality management. But the real education was happening every weekend when I drive back to Portland to check on the apartment, read guest feedback, and make improvements. By my junior year, I'd saved enough money to start thinking bigger. The apartment was consistently booked, getting 5-star reviews, and generating steady income. But I kept thinking about expansion, about taking everything I'd learned and applying it on a larger scale. That's when I started researching small hotels and inns for sale in the Pacific Northwest. Most were way out of my price range, but I wasn't looking for luxury properties. I was looking for potential, for properties with good bones that just needed someone willing to put in the work. I found it on a rainy Thursday afternoon in March, a small roadside inn about an hour outside of Portland. The listing had been up for 8 months with no buyers. 24 rooms, a restaurant space, and a pool area that hadn't been maintained in years. The photos looked terrible. Outdated furniture, stained carpets, and that sad, neglected feeling that comes with properties nobody wants. But I saw something else. Location on a scenic highway that got decent traffic, room layouts that made sense, and a price tag that was actually within reach if I used the apartment as collateral. "Alice, honey," my dad said when I called them about possibly taking out a loan, "maybe you should focus on finishing school first. Business ownership is really complicated." They meant well. I think they just couldn't see what I was seeing. They saw risk. I saw opportunity. I bought the Cascade in 6 months before my college graduation. 24 rooms of pure potential wrapped in 1980s decor and neglect. The day I got the keys, I stood in the lobby looking at wood paneling, harvest gold carpeting, and furniture that probably hadn't been replaced since the Carter administration. Most people would have seen a money pit. I saw a blank canvas. My first decision was to shut down for complete renovation instead of trying to operate while fixing things. It was financially risky, but I knew I couldn't compete with chain hotels by offering the same generic experience with slightly older furniture. I had a vision. Instead of trying to appeal to everyone, I'd create something unique. Each room would have its own theme and personality. The restaurant would feature local ingredients and rotating seasonal menus. The pool area would become an outdoor event space for small weddings and corporate retreats. I moved into the manager's apartment on site and spent every day from sunrise to sunset working alongside contractors, painters, and craftspeople. I learned to tile bathrooms, refinish hardwood floors, and negotiate with suppliers. My hands were permanently stained, and I lived in paint-splattered clothes for months. The themed rooms were my favorite project. Room 12 became Pacific Coast, with driftwood furniture and ocean-inspired colors. Room 8 was Mountain Lodge with exposed beams and a stone accent wall. Room 15 was Urban Loft, with industrial elements and modern art from local artists. But the real innovation was in the experiences. I partnered with local wineries to offer tasting packages. I created weekend murder mystery dinners in the restaurant. I installed a hot tub and fire pit area for evening gatherings. I even started hosting unplugged retreats where guests would check their devices at the front desk for digital detox weekends. The restaurant became my pride and joy. Instead of generic continental breakfast, I hired a chef who specialized in Pacific Northwest cuisine. We offered everything from farm-to-table dinners to casual poolside lunches with craft cocktails. My family still thought this was all some extended college project. When I'd call them, they'd ask about my classes and internship applications. I'd deflect by asking about my brother Tom's engineering program or updating them about my grades, which remained excellent despite my divided attention. "Are you sure you're not taking on too much with that hotel project?" my mom asked during one of our weekly calls. "You need to focus on finding a real job after graduation." A real job? If she only knew that I was already employing 8 people and had bookings stretching into the following year. The grand reopening was scheduled for Memorial Day weekend. I'd spent 18 months planning, building, and preparing. The local newspaper was sending a photographer. Travel bloggers had already started posting about the transformation. Reservation requests were coming in from all over the Pacific Northwest. The Cascade Inn's reopening exceeded every expectation I dared to have. We sold out completely for Memorial Day weekend, and the reviews were incredible. A hidden gem, wrote one travel blogger. Finally, a hotel with personality, said another. The themed rooms were a hit. Couples specifically requested the romantic cabin theme for anniversaries. Business travelers loved the urban loft rooms with their modern workspace setup. The Pacific Coast rooms were perfect for guests wanting to feel connected to Oregon's natural beauty. But what really set us apart were the experiences. Our murder mystery dinners sold out months in advance. The digital detox weekends attracted stressed executives from Seattle and Portland who were desperate to disconnect. The poolside happy hours created a social atmosphere that kept guests coming back. Within a year, I was consistently profitable and had a waiting list for popular weekend dates. More importantly, I was learning what guests really wanted. Not just a place to sleep, but an experience they couldn't get at a chain hotel. That's when I started looking for property number 2. I found a small boutique hotel in wine country that had been family-owned for 30 years. The elderly owners were ready to retire, and their children had no interest in hospitality. It had 12 rooms, a tasting room, and gorgeous vineyard views, but it was stuck in the past. The purchase process was more complex this time, involving investors and bank loans. But the Cascade Inn's success made everything easier. Numbers don't lie, and my numbers were impressive. I spent the next 2 years developing what would become my signature approach. Find properties with character and great locations, completely reimagine the guest experience, and create something unique enough that people would choose us over safer chain options. The wine country property became Vista Vineyard Inn, specializing in romantic getaways and small destination weddings. I added a spa treatment room, upgraded the tasting room to include small plates made with local ingredients, and created vineyard tour packages with neighboring wineries. By the time I turned 25, I owned 3 properties and was scouting for a 4th. Each hotel had its own personality and target market, but they all shared the same philosophy: exceptional service, unique experiences, and attention to details that made guests feel special. My apartment in Portland was still generating income, too, now managed by a property management company so I could focus on expanding the hotel business. Everything I touched seemed to turn to gold. But I was working 16-hour days and barely had time for a personal life. My family knew I was doing well with the hotels, but I'd never fully explained the scope of my success. They lived 3 hours away and were busy with their own lives. My parents both worked full-time, and Tom was finishing his engineering degree and getting serious with his girlfriend. Speaking of Tom's girlfriend, I'd heard her name mentioned in family phone calls, but had never met her. Emily something. They'd been dating for about a year, and from what I could gather it was getting serious, which brings me to the phone call that would change everything. Alice, I have a huge favor to ask. Tom's voice sounded nervous when he called me on a Tuesday evening in March. I was in my office at the Cascade Inn, reviewing next quarter's marketing budget. What's up? I asked, setting down my pen. Tom rarely called me directly, usually communicating through our parents during family updates. I need to do a training program for work, and it's in Portland. 2 weeks starting Monday. I was wondering. He paused, and I could practically hear him gathering courage. Is there any way I could crash at your place? I looked around my office, then out at the property where I spent most of my time. I hadn't lived in the apartment for years, but Tom didn't know that. More importantly, this was a perfect opportunity for some market research. Actually, I said, an idea forming. I can do better than that. There's this really nice hotel I know that offers extended stay packages. Why don't I book you a suite there? My treat. Alice, I can't let you pay for a hotel for 2 weeks. That's got to be expensive. If he only knew. Don't worry about it. I get a corporate discount. Technically true since I own the place. Besides, you'll be more comfortable than sleeping on my couch. Are you sure? That's incredibly generous. It's family, I said, already pulling up our reservation system. Besides, I'll be traveling for business most of those 2 weeks anyway. Also technically true. I'd been planning some property scouting trips. What I didn't tell Tom was that this would be perfect research. I could finally get honest feedback from a family member about our service, amenities, and overall guest experience. He'd have no idea he was staying at my hotel, so his opinions would be completely unbiased. I booked him into our best suite, the one with the kitchenette, separate living area, and view of the gardens. I made sure our staff knew he was a VIP guest, but didn't explain the relationship. I wanted him to be treated well, but I also wanted to see how our normal operations worked. The reservation is at the Cascade Inn, I told him. They're expecting you Monday afternoon. Room 24. This is amazing, Alice. Thank you so much. I promise I'll pay you back. Just enjoy yourself, and maybe we can grab dinner when I'm back in town. After hanging up, I realized this would be the first time Tom had experienced one of my properties. My parents had never visited, always saying they were too busy or that the drive from their town was too long. This felt like a big moment, even though Tom wouldn't know it. I briefed my manager, Sarah, the next morning. We have a VIP guest checking in Monday, Tom Parker. He's a friend of mine. I want everything perfect, but I don't want him to feel like he's getting special treatment. Got it. Regular excellent service, not obvious VIP treatment. Exactly. And I'd love to get his feedback when he checks out. What I couldn't have predicted was that this simple favor for my brother would set in motion a series of events that would expose family dynamics I'd never suspected and ultimately force a confrontation I'd been avoiding for years. But for now, I was just excited to finally have a family member experience what I'd been building. Tom's stay at the Cascade Inn? He called me halfway through his first week, raving about the service, the room, and especially the restaurant. Alice, this place is incredible. How did you even find out about it? The food is restaurant quality, and the staff treats me like I'm some kind of celebrity. Good staff makes all the difference, I said, smiling as I reviewed the notes our team had been taking about his preferences and feedback. There's this amazing chef here, and he's training this new assistant who's incredibly talented. Emily something. She's actually from our hometown originally. My ears perked up. Emily? The girlfriend he'd mentioned in passing during family calls. Emily. I asked casually. That's an interesting coincidence. Yeah, small world, right? We've been talking between her shifts. She's really passionate about cooking, and she's got this great laugh. His voice trailed off in that way that told me he was smitten. By the end of his 2-week stay, it was clear that Tom had fallen hard for Emily. Their connection was obvious to everyone on staff, and Tom was already making plans to extend his visit and potentially move to Portland. Alice, I think I might stay in Portland permanently, he said during our dinner on his last night. We were eating at the Cascade Inn restaurant, though he still had no idea I owned it. There are engineering opportunities here, and he grinned sheepishly, and Emily and I have really connected. I watched them interact during dinner service. Emily was clearly talented in the kitchen, and when she came out to meet Tom's sister, she was charming and funny. I liked her immediately, though something in her eyes when she looked at Tom's clothes and mentioned my nice purse made me file away a mental note. She seems great, I told Tom. Honestly, just take things slow. Long-distance relationships are complicated. 6 months later, Tom called with news I saw coming from a mile away. Alice, I proposed. Emily said yes. Congratulations. That's wonderful news. We're thinking about having the wedding next spring. Maybe somewhere in Portland since that's where we met. Emily's fallen in love with the city. Have you thought about venues? I asked, my heart starting to race as I realized where this might be headed. Actually, we were hoping to have it at the Cascade Inn. The place means so much to us since that's where we met. Do you think your friend who got you that corporate discount could help us with pricing? I took a deep breath. This was it, the perfect opportunity to finally reveal to my family what I'd been building all these years. A celebration where everyone would be together, where I could show them what I'd accomplished, and where I could get their honest opinions about my business. Let me make some calls, I said. I think I can work something out. What I was really thinking was that I would cover the entire cost of their wedding as my gift to them, the venue, the catering, everything. It would be my way of celebrating Tom's happiness, while finally revealing the truth about my success. I had no idea that this generous gesture would lead to the most humiliating moment of my life, and force me to make decisions that would change my family dynamics forever. But that's a story for the next part. Have you ever experienced a moment when you thought you were being generous, only to discover it revealed something ugly about the people you love? Share your thoughts in the comments below. When Tom called to ask about wedding venues, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to pay for their entire wedding at the Cascade Inn as my gift to them. But more importantly, this would be my moment to finally reveal to my family what I'd been building all these years. Mom, Dad, I said during our weekly family call, I want to contribute to Tom's wedding. I'd like to cover the venue and catering costs. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Alice, honey, my mom finally said. That's very generous, but wedding venues are expensive. Are you sure you can afford that? If only she knew I owned the venue. I've been saving, and this is important to me. Tom is my brother, and I want his day to be perfect. The venue they want is pretty upscale, my dad added. We're talking about significant money here. I understand. Let me handle the arrangements with the venue. I was practically vibrating with excitement about the surprise I was planning. Just don't tell Tom it's coming from me yet. I want it to be a surprise. What I was really planning was to reveal everything during the reception. I'd stand up, thank everyone for coming, and casually mention that as the owner of the Cascade Inn, I was thrilled to host my brother's wedding at my property. I could already picture their faces, the shock, the pride, the realization that their daughter and sister had built something incredible. I spent weeks planning every detail. The ceremony would be in our garden area with the mountain views as a backdrop. The reception would be in our main dining room, which could accommodate their 60 guests perfectly. I arranged for our best chef to create a custom menu featuring local ingredients and Emily's favorite dishes. I even flew in special orchids for the centerpieces and hired a string quartet for the ceremony. This wasn't just going to be a wedding. It was going to be a showcase of everything the Cascade Inn could offer. Alice has been so generous, I overheard my mom telling Tom during one of their planning calls, but we decided not to burden her with too many details. You know how she gets overwhelmed with that hotel job of hers. Hotel job. If they only knew. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur of activity. I was coordinating vendors, finalizing menus, and ensuring every detail was perfect, while also managing my other properties. I was so busy that I barely had time to shop for a dress, finally grabbing something simple from a department store the week before. Looking back, I should have realized that my family's casual dismissal of my hotel job was a warning sign about how they viewed my career. I should have noticed that they never asked details about my work or seemed curious about how I could afford such generous gestures, but I was too excited about the surprise to pay attention to those red flags. The day before the wedding, I flew back from a business trip to Seattle, where I'd been looking at a potential fifth property. My flight was delayed and I didn't get to the hotel until late that night. I did a final walkthrough with my staff, ensuring everything was perfect for Tom and Emily's big day. Boss, Sarah said as we checked the bridal suite one last time, are you sure your family doesn't know you own this place? Not yet, I said, adjusting the fresh flowers on the dresser. Tomorrow is going to be quite a revelation. What do you think will happen next when Alice finally reveals the truth to her family? The morning of the wedding dawned perfect and clear. I should have been getting ready with Emily and the bridesmaids, but I deliberately kept some distance to maintain the surprise. Instead, I spent the morning doing final checks with the catering staff and ensuring the ceremony space looked flawless. My flight from Seattle had arrived so late that I'd slept in my office rather than driving to my apartment. When I finally had a moment to get ready, I realized my simple black dress was more wrinkled than I'd noticed, and my hair was doing that thing it does when I sleep somewhere other than my own bed. But honestly, I was too excited about the surprise to care much about my appearance. This was Tom's day, and soon it would be my moment to finally share my success with my family. The ceremony was beautiful. Tom looked handsome in his navy suit, and Emily was radiant in a vintage-inspired gown that perfectly matched the inn's aesthetic. I watched from the back, noting how smoothly everything was running and feeling proud of my team's professionalism. During the cocktail hour, I mingled with guests, many of whom complimented the venue. "This place is incredible," Tom's college friend Mark said. "How did you guys find it?" I just smiled and said they had excellent taste. The reception was in full swing when I finally made my way to the family table. Tom was glowing with happiness. My parents looked proud, and Emily was laughing with her bridesmaids. Everything was perfect. That's when Emily turned to greet me. I hadn't had a chance to properly introduce myself earlier. And seeing her up close, I realized she was even more beautiful than I'd noticed during Tom's stay. But as her eyes took in my appearance, the wrinkled dress, my travel mussed hair, the fact that I clearly looked like someone who just stepped off a plane, her expression shifted. She leaned in close to me, her voice low enough that only I could hear. "You know, you really shouldn't have come looking like that. You're kind of bringing down the whole vibe of our photos." The words hit me like a physical blow. For a moment, I couldn't process what she just said. "I'm sorry," I managed to whisper back. Emily's smile never wavered, but her eyes remained cold. "I mean, this is our wedding day. Everyone else made an effort to look nice. Poor people just ruined the photos, you know? Poor people." I stood there in my wrinkled department store dress, surrounded by the beautiful wedding I'd paid for in the hotel I owned, listening to my new sister-in-law call me poor and tell me I didn't belong at my own brother's wedding. The irony was so complete it was almost funny. Almost. I opened my mouth to respond, to reveal exactly who she was talking to, but then I heard my mother's voice calling Emily's name. This wasn't the time or place for the revelation I'd planned. Instead, I took a step back and said, "Excuse me, I need some air." I turned and walked toward the exit, my cheeks burning with humiliation and my carefully planned surprise completely derailed. I made it as far as the lobby before I felt a gentle hand on my arm. I turned to see a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a concerned expression. "Excuse me, dear. Are you all right?" I recognized her as Emily's mother, though we'd never been formally introduced. She was wearing a lovely navy dress and had the same bone structure as Emily, but her expression held a warmth that her daughters had lacked. "I'm fine," I said, though my voice was shakier than I wanted to admit. "Just needed a moment. I'm Margaret, Emily's mother." She extended her hand warmly. "I don't think we've had a chance to meet properly." "Alice," I said, shaking her hand. "I'm Tom's sister." "Oh." Her face lit up with recognition. "Tom's told us so much about you. You're the one who arranged for him to stay here during his training program, aren't you?" I nodded, not trusting my voice to say more. "And you're the one who's been so generous about the wedding costs." She squeezed my hand gently. Emily mentioned that Tom's sister had helped with the venue. Before I could respond, Emily appeared beside us, her wedding dress rustling as she approached. "Mom, there you are. The photographer wants to do the family photos now." Margaret kept hold of my hand. "Emily, dear, I was just meeting Alice properly, Tom's sister." Emily's expression shifted slightly, some of her earlier coldness melting into politeness. "Oh, right. Thank you again for helping with the venue arrangements. Actually," Margaret continued, "I was hoping to introduce you both properly since Alice and I will be working together." Emily and I both looked confused. Working together? Emily asked. Margaret smiled broadly. Well, Alice is my boss, sweetheart. She owns the Cascade Inn. The color drained from Emily's face so completely that I thought she might faint in her wedding dress. She what? Emily's voice was barely a whisper. Alice is the owner of this beautiful hotel, Margaret repeated, clearly not understanding the tension that had suddenly filled the air. I've been the operations manager here for 2 years. She's been wonderful to work for. Emily's eyes darted between her mother and me, and I could practically see her replaying our conversation from 20 minutes earlier. The comment about poor people ruining photos, the dismissal of my appearance, the assumption that I didn't belong at this wedding, all directed at the woman who owned the venue, who had paid for their wedding, and who now employed her mother. Alice, Emily said, her voice filled with something between panic and apology. I didn't realize. Tom never mentioned. It's fine, I said quietly, though it absolutely wasn't. I should let you get back to your photos. I turned to leave, but Margaret called after me. Alice, wait. Will you be staying for the reception? I'd love for you to meet my husband. And Emily's been so excited about working in the restaurant kitchen. Emily worked in our kitchen. Of course she did. The talented assistant chef Tom had mentioned. The woman my brother had fallen in love with was my employee. I think I need to head out early, I said, not looking back at Emily. Please give my congratulations to Tom. As I walked toward the exit, I heard Margaret say to Emily, Darling, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. I didn't hear Emily's response. I was already planning my next move. I drove to my apartment in Portland for the first time in months, needing space to think and plan my next steps. The place looked exactly as I'd left it. Still gorgeous, still generating income through my property management company, still the foundation of everything I'd built. But right now it felt like a refuge. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the couch that had started this whole journey, looking out at the city lights and trying to process what had just happened. Emily had called me poor, had told me I didn't belong at the wedding, had suggested I was ruining photos simply by existing in the same space, all while working for my company, living in my town, and marrying my brother with money I'd provided. The humiliation burned, but underneath it was something colder and more calculating. I'd built this business by making smart decisions and protecting my investments. Emily had just revealed herself to be the kind of person who would treat people badly based on assumptions about their economic status. That wasn't the kind of employee I wanted representing my brand. I opened my laptop and logged into our staff scheduling system. Emily was listed as assistant chef, hired 8 months ago, currently scheduled for Tuesday through Saturday shifts. I picked up my phone and called Sarah, my operations manager. Alice, how's the wedding going? Complicated, I said. I need you to handle something first thing Monday morning. Emily Rodriguez needs to be terminated. The new kitchen assistant? Did something happen? She's not a good fit for our company culture. Have James prepare her final paycheck and termination paperwork. I'll email you the details. Sarah paused. Is this related to her being at your brother's wedding? It's related to her being the kind of person who treats others badly based on assumptions. That's not who we are as a company. After hanging up, I sat for a long time thinking about my family dynamics. Tom had no idea I owned the Cascade Inn. My parents had no idea about the scope of my business success. They'd all assumed I was just getting some kind of employee discount for the wedding. Their casual dismissal of my capabilities stung almost as much as Emily's cruelty. I could reveal everything tomorrow. I could call Tom and explain that his new wife had just humiliated the sister who'd paid for their wedding. I could tell my parents exactly how successful their daughter had become. But something held me back. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was curiosity about how this would all unfold naturally. Or maybe I just wanted to see what kind of people my family really were when they thought I couldn't do anything about Emily's behavior. I spent the rest of the weekend at the apartment catching up on business emails. and letting my family believe I'd simply left the wedding early. No one called to check on me or ask why I disappeared. Monday morning, I was in my office at the Vista Vineyard Inn when Sarah called. "It's done," she said. Emily Rodriguez was terminated at 9 a.m. She seemed shocked, kept asking if this was about the wedding. What did James tell her? That her performance hadn't met our standards and the position was being eliminated. Standard termination protocol. Good. Any other issues I should know about? Well, she did ask if she could speak with the owner to appeal the decision. I almost laughed. I'm sure she did. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone was ringing off the hook. The first call came from Tom, and his voice was confused rather than angry. "Alice, I don't understand what happened. Emily was fired from the Cascade Inn yesterday, and she thinks it has something to do with you." With me? I kept my voice neutral. How would I have anything to do with her job? That's what I told her, but she insists there's some connection. She said something happened at the wedding, but she won't tell me what. I waited, curious to see how much Emily had confessed to my brother about her behavior. "Alice, did something happen between you two at the wedding? Emily's been crying since yesterday, and she keeps saying she made a terrible mistake." "We barely spoke," I said, which was technically true. "I left early because I wasn't feeling well." Tom sighed. "This whole thing is so weird. She had this job for months with no problems, and then suddenly she's fired the day after our wedding. The timing seems really strange." "Maybe it was a coincidence," I suggested. "Companies make staffing decisions all the time." But Emily said the manager mentioned that her performance hadn't met standards. "Alice, I've eaten at that restaurant. Emily is incredibly talented. Something doesn't add up." My brother wasn't stupid. He could sense there was more to the story. "Did you ask her what she thinks she did wrong?" I asked. Another pause. "She won't tell me. She just keeps crying and saying she ruined everything." Wednesday brought a call from my mother. "Alice, honey, we need to talk. Tom is very upset about Emily's job situation, and there are some things we're trying to understand." "What kind of things?" "Well, Emily told Tom that you own the hotel where the wedding was held. Is that true?" Here it was. The moment of revelation I'd been planning for months, except it was happening because my new sister-in-law had been forced to confess rather than because I'd chosen to share my success. "Yes," I said simply. "You own the Cascade Inn?" "I own several hotels, actually." The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Mom." "Alice, why didn't you tell us? How long have you owned hotels?" "About 5 years. I started with one and expanded from there. But when we talked about helping with the wedding costs, you never mentioned that you owned the venue. I wanted it to be a surprise. I was planning to announce it during the reception. What happened to that plan?" I took a deep breath. Emily happened. Thursday evening, my entire family showed up at the Cascade Inn for what my mother had called an emergency family meeting. I was waiting for them in our private dining room, having arranged for our chef to prepare a tasting menu that showcased our best dishes. If my family was finally going to learn about my business, they were going to experience it properly. Tom and Emily arrived first, both looking stressed and uncomfortable. Emily's eyes were red-rimmed, and she couldn't seem to look directly at me. My parents came in behind them, taking in the elegant private dining room with obvious surprise. "Alice," my father said, "this is incredible. You really own all of this." "This and 4 other properties in Oregon and Washington," I confirmed, gesturing for everyone to sit down. 5 hotels. My mother's voice was faint. "How did we not know this?" "Because you never asked," I said simply. "You knew I was working in hospitality, but you assumed it was just a job." Tom leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly on the table. "Alice, Emily thinks you had her fired because of something that happened at the wedding. Is that true?" I looked at Emily, who was staring at her hands. "Why don't you tell them what happened, Emily?" She raised her eyes to mine. and I saw a mixture of shame and fear there. I made a comment, she said quietly. I didn't know who Alice was, and I said something inappropriate. What kind of comment? My father asked. Emily's voice dropped to almost a whisper. I told her she shouldn't have come to the wedding because poor people ruin photos. The silence that followed was deafening. You said what? Tom's voice was sharp with disbelief. I didn't know she was your sister, Emily said, tears starting to fall. I thought she was just some random guest who hadn't dressed appropriately. Even if she wasn't my sister, Tom said, his voice rising. What gave you the right to say something like that to anyone? Before Emily could answer, there was a soft knock on the door. James, our head chef, entered carrying a beautifully plated appetizer course. Excuse me, he said, setting down the plates. I wanted to personally present the first course and welcome your family to our restaurant. James, I said, these are my parents, my brother Tom and his wife Emily. I paused. Emily used to work in our kitchen. James nodded politely at my family, then turned to Emily with professional courtesy. Ah, yes, Emily. I hope you're finding success in your new position. Tom looked confused. New position? James glanced at me, then back to Emily. Well, we had to make some staffing adjustments based on performance evaluations. Emily's skills were, let's say they were better suited for a different environment. My mother frowned. Performance evaluations? Emily is a lovely person, James continued diplomatically, but her technical skills and attitude toward teamwork weren't quite the right fit for our standards here. I watched Emily's face crumble as she realized that even without knowing about our wedding day encounter, James would have had legitimate concerns about her work performance. Thank you, James, I said. Please give our compliments to the kitchen. After he left, Tom turned to Emily with a look I'd never seen before. So it wasn't just about what you said to Alice. There were actual performance issues. Emily nodded miserably. I've been struggling with the advanced techniques and I may have been difficult to work with when I got frustrated. My father cleared his throat. Alice, your mother and I owe you an apology. We had no idea what you'd accomplished, and we clearly underestimated your capabilities. What I don't understand, my mother added, is why you never told us. We are your family. I set down my fork and looked around the table at these people I loved who had somehow managed to know so little about my life. Because you never seemed interested in the details. When I told you I was working in hospitality, you assumed it was temporary. When I said business was going well, you nodded and changed the subject to Tom's engineering program. You love me, but you've never seen me as someone who could build something significant. Tom's voice was quiet when he spoke. Alice, I'm sorry. About Emily's behavior. About us not paying attention to your success. About all of it. Emily finally looked up from her hands. Alice, I am so sorry. What I said was horrible, and you had every right to fire me. I judged you completely wrongly, and I ruined what should have been a celebration of your generosity. I studied her face, looking for sincerity beneath the tears and embarrassment. Emily, I said finally, what you said revealed something about your character that I couldn't ignore. Not because it hurt my feelings, but because it showed me you're the kind of person who treats others badly based on assumptions about their worth. She nodded, accepting the judgment. However, I continued, James is right that there were performance issues independent of our encounter. So while the timing wasn't coincidental, the decision was based on multiple factors. My brother reached for Emily's hand. We both have some growing up to do, apparently. As the evening continued and our family began to really talk for the first time in years, I realized that Emily's cruel comment had actually given me an unexpected gift. It had forced a confrontation that revealed not just her character, but the dynamics that had allowed my family to remain so disconnected from my actual life. And while the humiliation still stung, watching Emily grapple with the consequences of her assumptions felt like exactly the kind of lesson the universe specializes in delivering. Sometimes the best revenge isn't what you plan. It's simply letting people face the natural consequences of their choices. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength when family dynamics get complicated. Remember, success isn't always about proving yourself to others. Sometimes it's about proving something to yourself.